The universe is a very unlikely place. The values of some basic physical constants have been precisely adjusted to make our lives possible. Tiny changes in these values would mean that we couldn't be here at all. Is this genuinely new evidence pointing to a God who created the universe? Why are things so finely balanced to make possible life on a razor's edge? But what do scientists mean when they talk about cosmic fine-tuning?
It turns out, and this is a very surprising, unexpected discovery, that the laws of physics, the basic given fabric of the world, had to be very specific, very finely tuned, as we sometimes say, for the possibility of carbon-based life appearing at all. It's a very surprising conclusion. But it's true, and all scientists would acknowledge that's the case.
Suppose we had a machine that could generate universes, and we'd have to decide what laws of physics we wanted to give our universe and make sure we had one dial for every law of physics we wanted to give our universe on our universe-generating machine. But we'd also have to tune the relative strengths or weaknesses of those different laws. So, for example, if we wanted to give our universe a law of gravity, we'd want to say, well, how strong would we want our law of gravity to be, and so on. Well, if we took a machine that was set up to represent the laws of physics that actually exist in our universe, one dial for every law that we actually have and all the strengths the way that they actually are, but we took just one of those dials and changed it just a minute percentage, then we pressed the Produce a Universe button. What would be produced? Well, scientists have been astonished to discover, running the numbers as it were, that what would be produced then would be a universe that was lifeless and dull and uninteresting.
The Big Bang is currently accepted in the scientific community. And the initial conditions, if you think about it, if you have an expansion, like I don't know, you can imagine this Big Bang, all the energy and mass going out, and there's an amount of gravity which will slow it down. And so if you have, like, say, too much mass at the beginning, too much mass and energy at the beginning, then the expansion takes place, but it contracts again too quickly, and you wouldn't actually have the formation of stars and galaxies. On the other hand, if there was a bit less mass, then the expansion would be so rapid that stars and galaxies wouldn't condense. And it's amazing because the initial conditions which actually are required in order for us to be here, if you change those by 1 part in a million billion, and that's what I call fine-tuning, then we wouldn't be here.
A very simple and central example is the question of where does carbon come from? The very early universe doesn't make any carbon. It's very simple, it only makes simple things, hydrogen and helium, and they're pretty boring in terms of chemistry. Now, where does carbon come from? There's only one place in the whole universe where carbon is made, and it's in the interior nuclear furnaces of the stars. We are people of stardust, made of the ashes of dead stars. And it turns out that the process by which the carbon is made inside the stars is an extraordinarily delicate process. In fact, it looked at first sight as though it couldn't happen at all. It's only possible because there's a very large enhancement effect called a resonance in the trade, which makes it go much quicker than we might have expected. And that resonance is there because the laws of nuclear physics take a very specific form. If they were a little bit different, either there would be no resonance or it would be in the wrong place at the wrong energy. That's a very striking example of how finely tuned the universe has to be for us to be inhabitants of it.
I can give you one of the most famous examples of that, if you like, and that's due to Fred Hoyle, who was an atheist astrophysicist. interesting background to Fred Hoyle, because originally he was opposed to the Big Bang because he thought it meant that the universe had an origin, and if it had an origin in time, you might need a god to make it. Now, theologians are, more blasé about that, but Hoyle, as an atheist, was really troubled by that, and he proposed the steady state theory instead, which was eventually overthrown. And the Big Bang reigns supreme. But Hoyle did some really, really important work on how the chemical elements of which the stars, of the planets, and ultimately us, of what are made. And he discovered that you need a very, very fine balance of the forces in nature in order to make carbon inside stars, which is essential for life, and in order to make oxygen without destroying all the carbon in the process. So two seeming coincidences necessary in order to get the materials for life. And when Hoyle made that discovery, he was moved to remark that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics and with all of chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. It's a put-up job, was the kind of way he expressed it. He was deeply impressed by this, and here you have an atheist, a man who called religion an illusion, and he said that in books and on TV programs in the early 50s and so on. Here's a man who, with that kind of background, talked about a super intellect monkeying with physics.
Scientists discovered the first examples of cosmic fine-tuning back in the 1950s and 60s. Today, they know of many more examples, and some of these have to be very precisely tuned. Life really is balanced on a razor's edge.
Now, most of us know that the orbit of the Earth is just in the right place. If it was slightly closer to the Sun, it would be too hot for life to exist. If it was just slightly further away from the Sun, it would be too cold for life to exist. And we know that by looking at Mars and seeing that actually life, if it did develop at a very primitive level, didn't go forward in the way that life on Earth has. Now, that's a circumstance. It means that the orbit of the Earth is just right, as Goldilocks would have said, for life to develop. But when you look at the universe as a whole, you see embedded in the laws themselves this Goldilocks enigma, as Paul Davies says. The fact that the universe is just right for the development of intelligent life. And it's not just right, it's extraordinarily just right. One of the things about cosmic fine-tuning is not just that it's fine-tuned, but it's fine-tuned to the most extraordinary degree. And as you look around, for instance, in the energy levels of carbon or oxygen, which make possible the fact that there's lots of carbon in the universe, and that's important for us because we're made of the stuff, or in the balances in the early universe embedded in the physical constants, there is an extraordinary fine-tuning which makes possible life. And for many of us, whether we have religious faith or not, this raises a question of what is going on. Is there a deeper story to the universe, or is there an explanation for this cosmic fine-tuning?
So is there a deeper story? Does cosmic fine-tuning tell us that the universe has been deliberately designed for life? Is it a pointer to God? Some scientists are deeply uncomfortable with this conclusion, and they look for ways out from it. Next time we'll start examining these ways out.